Did you kill him?
What kind of fucking animal do you take me for? No, I didn't kill him.
Oh, fuck.
But I did kidnap his wife.
I know, I'm just as surprised as you. I saw a movie that wasn't a part of a big franchise, like a Marvel, DC, or Star Wars. There was just something about Amsterdam that, seeing the trailer, attracted me to it, not just from the cast, but it was like a murder mystery comedy almost. Not necessarily a parody of murder mysteries, but it just seemed like they were mixing some genres together, and I really wanted to see how it was going to turn out. And this past Sunday, me and my friend Daryl ended up seeing the movie, and I gotta say, that 34% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, I disagree with. I mean, sitting through it, it was very interesting. There was definitely, again, some boring parts, but for the most part, you're kind of intrigued as to try to figure out who are the main killers in the movie, because there is this guy in the beginning who's friends with Christian Bale's character, his name was Bert, and his buddy Harold are trying to figure out who killed Liz, who's played by Taylor Swift. They're trying to figure out who or what killed her father. So you're probably wondering, what does Bert have to do with all this? Why did Liz go to him to kind of figure this out? Because really what they were saying her father died of was just natural causes because of his age, but she wanted to do the autopsy because she would kind of figure that somebody was out to get her dad because she or he knew information and he was going to, leak it out there. And it turns out from the autopsy that somebody poisoned him with this certain medication, and they weren't sure what kind of medicine or whatever it was, but it seemed like he was getting poisoned not just like right away, but it was like years that it took for him to get poisoned. And throughout this time, Liz just gets scared because she's like, well, they're going to be after me and all this kind of stuff. And then there's this random guy while she's talking to Bert and Bert's friend, Harold, who they're friends from the military. I'll kind of get to that portion in a minute. And this guy just kind of comes out and pushes Taylor Swift under the car that's like coming through traffic.
Fuck you, bitch!
And it runs her over and kills her, so if you were gonna go see this movie for Taylor Swift, she's in it for like 10 minutes at the most, a couple of scenes. It's not a lot, and obviously there's people there that are blaming Bert and Harold on her death because, well, I guess they didn't see the random guy push Taylor Swift into the car, but is what it is there. This took place in 1933 New York, and you gotta kind of think, with Harold being a person of color, that could have been the main reason they decided to pin it on those two, because, oh, this guy's with a black man, they were obviously doing something bad, even though Harold is a lawyer and Bert is a doctor, and they were helping this woman, but no one wants to listen at this point in time. And throughout this time, Bert's kind of, showing us what happened while he was in war, because apparently his in-laws forced him to go to war, and how he met Harold. And then that's when we run into Margot Robbie's character Valerie, who was this doctor in the war. She would take care of the wounded patients and all this kind of stuff, and throughout the time there she became friends with Bert and kind of fell in love with Harold, which, if there's anything this took place in World War I. Back in that time in the world, if you were in the US, it was illegal for interracial couples to be a thing, so they stayed in Amsterdam because in Amsterdam there was nothing against it, but they all ended up, leaving each other at one point in time, kind of breaking their friendship pact. And now with Bert and Harold dealing with this, trying to clear their name, as they're trying to figure out what's going on, they were told to, go to Tom Vose, talk to him, he might know something about this. And we find out that Tom Vose is actually the brother of Valerie, and Valerie actually went back home when she left Amsterdam, and apparently her brother is keeping her in this room because they find her art to be weird, and she has this medical issue, she can't go outside too much, and this, that, and the other. They think she's basically insane when she's really not. So obviously the other three, they, get back together doing their own thing, and Tom says, I'll help you with this. Him and his wife Libby, who's played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and by the way, Tom Vose is played by Rami Malek, again, star-studded cast. They decide to help out as much as they can, And they said, if you bring us this guy Gil, then we will definitely help you out to clear your name. Gil's played by Robert De Niro. He's kind of like this activist for wounded soldiers and all this. I didn't necessarily know if he was trying to, you know, take over the White House or something like that, but he was trying to start this thing where wounded soldiers can run for president, or wounded soldiers should just, you know, be the ones to run for president, because that way they'll have someone that actually cares about the troops, this, that, and the other. And in my head, it was a lot of jumping around as to who maybe could have committed this murder. At first you're like, is it Gil? Did he plan all this? Or maybe it was Mike Myers' character and his buddy, where they end up being these undercover detectives who are actually trying to figure out the, you know, murder of this person as well, because supposedly this was like a whole ploy for Nazis to eventually take over. Keep in mind, this was before World War II, so that was kind of in people's heads, and I kind of thought, well, maybe it's them because they are acting a little suspicious. But spoiler alert, it was not Gil, it was not Mike Myers and his partner. It was somebody that you wouldn't be expecting. However, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, because that would ruin the experience for you. It's up for your interpretation who you think it might be just from my review. But it gets interesting the more the movie goes on. Now, the movie does deal with other plots. Christian Bale has a very up-and-down marriage with his wife, whose name is Beatrice. He's just not sure if she loves him that much, and he's trying to figure all this out. While one of his partners in the medical field, Irma St. Clair, who's played by Zoe Saldana, he kind of has, you know, a thing for, and he actually feels more in love with her than he does his actual wife. And by the end of the movie, when his wife is like, oh, me and my parents were so proud of you, you can move back in, he was like,
no, I don't think I will.
I don't think I want to be with you. I don't really love you that much. And he kind of, you know, finds himself in this case and finds out the person that he wants to be overall. It's just an interesting movie. I feel like it does a lot and keeps you interested throughout the 2 hours and 14 minutes. Like, if you're a very impatient person, then it'll definitely get on your nerves, but for me, I always like to keep the suspense up because you're never really sure what's gonna come of this and all this kind of stuff. And I found it interesting too how Robert De Niro's character was giving this big speech at the end, so that way they can try to catch the killer, and he ends up getting shot at. He doesn't get shot, but like, it reminded me a lot of the end of Joker, because Robert De Niro was in that as Murray, and when the Joker comes on and has his big rant and then ends up, you know, shooting Robert De Niro, I was like, are they just gonna pull what they did in Joker again?
You get what you fucking deserve!
It reminded me a lot of that. It was funny. Plus, Chris Rock was in here. He was mainly just to be the loud character, as he usually is. Like, he served purpose, but not too much of a purpose. Like, he didn't do a whole lot, but he was there for the most part, but he wasn't like a main character. So again, murder mystery, I think it worked very well. Comedy, I think it's more of a dark comedy. It's not necessarily like there was obvious comedic moments, but there was definitely moments there that had me chuckling at some of the things that they did. And I really, really like the way that Christian Bale, John David Washington, and Margot Robbie go about feeling like they had this, you know, friendship, this relationship together. Like, it felt true, it felt real in the movie. Like, they definitely did a good job with that, with their characters, and just the ups and downs that their characters had to face before in the end they realized, you know, friends have to stick together, but at some point in time too, considering Harold and Valerie were in love with each other, I think Bert finally realized, he's like, you know, they're gonna be happy where they're at, and we can always keep in touch. He decides to stay in New York while they go to, it wasn't Amsterdam, but it was somewhere else, to live their life and, you know, maybe eventually even get married and all this kind of stuff. It had a lot more than just, oh, who murdered this person. It gives you good background as to how these characters met, what they're involved in, because the main reason too that Bert was basically told about this guy dying in the beginning, Bill, it was because he looked up to this guy, and Valerie knew that, and Valerie was actually the one that told Liz to hire Bert and Harold to kind of figure out what happened to her father. So in the end, it all came full circle.
That was an oval! It has to be a circle!
It was mainly planned by Valerie, however, they didn't think that they would get into all of the bullshit that they got into. So, yeah. Again, I'm not going to spoil who did it, because I feel like then you wouldn't have a good time enjoying the movie. It's not like other spoilers where I can say, oh yeah, this, and this. It's too big of a spoiler for me to even say, but it was an interesting movie that kept me interested all the way through. Like I said, I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes score before I saw the movie, and I'm like, you know, at this point, I just kind of stopped looking at that, because I think the only movie I've seen this year where the Rotten Tomatoes score actually, was Morbius, but I don't even think Morbius was as terrible as whatever low rating they gave it. I mean, I still think it's a bad movie, but I don't think it was that bad. Like, they're putting it down as one of the worst things ever, and I'm just like, I've seen worse. And with this one, I'd give it about a 65-70%. Like I said, there's some aspects of the movie where you're just kind of like, oh, whatever, it drags it on, but for the most part, you're left on the edge of your seat, you're left guessing, and by the end of the movie you're going, whoa. Once you start thinking about it, you're like, it was right in front of us this whole entire time, and we never noticed, because another main thing is that Valerie ends up having this medical issue where they say that she's having, I think it was like epilepsy or something like that, even though Bert and Harold kind of realize, they're like, well, she never had that when she was in Amsterdam, so something's got to be going on to where she's all of a sudden, you know, feeling this medically, you know, terrible. Like, it was all like, once you start putting those pieces together, you start to realize, you're like, oh, that's who did it. And I think it's just highly entertaining, and I would recommend, if you're going to go see it in theaters or wait for it to come on streaming or Blu-ray or whatever, it's definitely one I would recommend, and it's actually one of my favorites of the year. Yeah, it was the first time in a while that I've seen a non-Marvel DC type movie in theaters, and it was worth it, I think. It was really worth it. I was entertained all the way through, and never really zoned out, because I myself was trying to figure out the mystery and put the clues that they had together, so. One more thing before I end the video too, I think the cinematography was also really interesting, because they would have these shots where the characters were talking to each other, but it looked like they were talking to you, and it was just, it actually gets you engaged or makes you feel engaged. So that was another thing I forgot to mention that I thought was pretty cool about this movie. It's something that you don't often see, but in this case, it works. That's my thoughts on this. If you've seen the movie, I'd really like to hear your opinions on it down below. And until then, stay safe out there, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and I will catch you all in the next one.